This is Football Night in America, served by Applebee's.
Welcome inside Studio 3. Time to recap what we saw Sunday. Maria Taylor alongside Matthew Berry, Mike Florio, Devin McCourty, and Jason Garrett. The most excited I've ever seen you, Florio.
I'm very excited.
That means the season's just started, literally.
And Minnesota won.
Yeah. That might have a little something to do with it. Just a little bit.
We're not going to start there. I'm sorry. You're going to have to wait your turn. We're going to start with Kansas City taking on the Bengals and what we learned. If we learned more about who the Chiefs are, or if we learned more about what the Bengals are trying to become. Jason?
You know, I think the Bengals have to feel better about their team this week than they did last week. Going to Kansas City, really having them on the ropes. Cincinnati let the game get away from them. 4th and extra long at the end of the ball game. Mahomes throws it up, and they get a defensive pass interference that sets up the game-winning field goal. So, you know, losses are losses. There's no such thing as moral victories in the National Football League. But when they reflect back on that game, Kansas City arguably the best team in football. They had them. I think they took a step from last week.
And I agree with you to a certain level because I think this Bengals team, everyone keeps talking about they're not scared of the Chiefs. They've gone to Arrowhead. And no one cares about that. Did you go and win?
Exactly
and
right.
in this game, they didn't go win. So, yes, you played better. All of that's great. But at the end of the day, the plays to be made to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, you didn't make. So now you're sitting here at 0-2, and we said it last week. Some of those teams that struggled, Chicago, and they figured out how to win. And you like learning with a win instead of now 2 weeks in a row you fall short and you're still trying to look ahead to some positive things.
See, I don't think we learned anything about either team that we didn't already know. The Bengals struggle early. They're 1-9 under Joe Burrow during his 5 years in the NFL, week 1 and week 2. And the Chiefs always find a way. So the question is, will there be a rematch between these two? Because the Bengals are one of the only teams that don't freak out, that don't believe they can't do it. And we saw today they believe they can do it.
We need a bigger sample size of that. Everyone keeps saying that.
But we saw it today. They're not afraid of the Chiefs.
Everyone keeps saying they start slow and they pick it up. It's like we're talking about the Patriots dynasty.
They better pick it up. They better pick it up this year.
We're talking 4 years. 2 years they've had good runs. 2 years they haven't. Who knows
Joe
what they
Burrow
do this
gets
year.
injured. That's the key, though. Joe Burrow's got to stay healthy.
Exactly. Yep.
Although I got to be honest, I thought Joe Burrow looked a lot better today than he did in week 1. I think that's a positive. He went on the road, but to your point, Mike, in terms of slow starts, this is now the 3rd straight 0-2 start for the Cincinnati Bengals. Their 5th in 6 seasons under Zach Taylor. And so, that's a tough division, obviously. And they've been able to work their ways out of that 0-2 start the last couple of years, but it doesn't get any easier. They need to get T. Higgins back. They got to get Burrow and Chase going. I will say this about the Kansas City Chiefs, though. Think about them, right? They've gotten 4 catches out of Travis Kelce through 2 games, right? And they beat Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. They are the defending 2-time Super Bowl champions. Everyone's put them up on the board and saying, this is who we got to get through. And through 2 games, they've found ways to beat Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow.
Well,
that's saying something.
Yeah, but let's go back to last year. They flopped around for 16 weeks on offense.
Up and down,
right?
Yep.
They were up and down. They had no answer for anything. And then when it came to crunch time, going to the playoffs, they're like, okay, here we go. Pacheco, Kelce, we're going to throw the ball to Rashee Rice, and Mahomes was Mahomes, and they played to their defense. So they've proven to us that they can win different ways. This isn't the team from 4 years ago, the high-flying, high-wire act. That's not what they are anymore. They're a championship team that can win different ways with any part of their football team. They continue to show us that.
They do have to worry about Pacheco now, though.
I was just going to say, yeah.
With the ankle injury, I'm told the fibula is what they're specifically concerned about. Walking boot, crutches, tests on Monday. We'll see. They got Samaje Perine. They got to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire back. They may have an issue there.
Yeah.
That running back room, Samaje Perine just got there. CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is on IR for another couple of games. And then they got Carson Steele, the undrafted free agent. It's a thin running back room. Maybe they call Jerick McKinnon and say, hey, come on back. But they're going to have to do something because if Pacheco is gone, they're
the one team we trust no matter what right now.
Doesn't matter who rolls out.
Betting on them, not against them. They'll figure it out.
Oh, I know they will, but Pacheco would be a big loss for
No
that
doubt.
offense.
He's a Rutgers guy, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Scarlet
absolutely.
Knights, let's go.
90 yards for Pacheco.
Where football began.
Yeah.
My favorite Rutgers player. Yeah.
Ooh, the shade just
I'm not a player.
thrown.
I'm a media guy.
Yeah, there you go.
Got it, done. But what's interesting is, and you kind of said it, Jason, I feel like 2 years ago, we're in this studio having conversations about the Chiefs, and we're all like, what's wrong with them? What's going on? And now you're just like, The Chiefs will be fine no matter what happens and whoever they roll out there.
And to me, that's the sign of a championship team. Your teams that you guys had with the Patriots, you just kind of figured it out. In the end of the game, you looked up, and the Patriots have more than the other team does. That's what this team is.
And we got to stop talking about the Bengals like they're that. They're not that yet.
Okay, we will stop then. We got you until next week. If they win, we're going to talk about it. Let's talk about a surprising loss. A dog that went on the road, took on the Cowboys, who had won countless regular season games at home and erased everything. I mean, they came out throwing punches. We saw Mike Tyson on the sideline before, and I was like, who threw the first punch? It was the Saints from the beginning. And Jason, I'm going to start with you again in this game, because what is happening with the Cowboys?
Well, you just said it. They threw the first punch. New Orleans came to AT&T Stadium, and they got after them first. And if you look back at the Cowboys over the last 2 years, dominant team at home. And the formula has been get ahead early, play to that defense, let Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence get up the field. The DBs are all jumping on everything because they know the quarterback has to get the ball out of his hand. The defensive linemen are in track stances because we're ahead in the game. Think about back last year when they lose to Green Bay. Matt LaFleur takes the ball. They go right down the field. Green Bay gets ahead in the game, and all of a sudden it kind of changes. Now the Cowboys are playing from behind, and they can't play to that same formula. That's exactly what happened today against the Saints. The Saints threw the first punch. Iron Mike Tyson was in the building. They threw the first punch, and they kept throwing it and throwing it. Micah Parsons was not a factor in the game. DeMarcus Lawrence, not a factor. Carr has plenty of time to throw the ball way down the field. They're running the ball. Kamara is really hard to stop. 4 touchdowns in the game, so they dominated all 3 phases, most importantly on the line of scrimmage, and they played the game they wanted to play.
It's interesting you say that, because we looked at this Dallas defense last week against Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns, and we're like, they're all over the place, 9 pressures, this and that. And what you just spoke about, when you don't play from ahead, what that does to a defense is now we have to think about, how do we play the run with Kamara? How do we stop the play action pass next? How do we stop the drop back pass? You start throwing all these things out there, and as a defense, you have to defend them all. When you play from ahead, you know it's a pass play every time.
Here we go.
You just go. Yeah. So making Dallas's defense defend everything, I think that's their kryptonite. And I won't say Dallas, any defense, when you can do that, it changes the game.
It's both amazing and not amazing that Alvin Kamara had the performance he had today. It's not amazing because we've seen him do this to a Mike Zimmer coached defense before. Christmas Day 2020, 6 touchdowns against the Vikings.
Sorry, Vikings.
4 today against Zimmer's new defense.
Sorry.
But it's all right. I'm over it.
You're not.
I was.
Scars.
Before today.
I brought that up ASAP.
I was before today. But Kamara isn't happy with his contract. And he hasn't been happy with his contract, and he's put all that behind him. And the issue with the Saints has been cultural. And they've worked hard to try to kind of reset the mindset of the locker room. You can only bring in so many new players in any given offseason, but they've consciously been trying to improve the mindset, the attitude, the approach. And to get Kamara to buy in when he knows he's getting cut after this year because his salary goes through the roof, that's impressive. So the Saints have something going in the right direction.
Yeah, you know what? 2 things. First off, I think, we're all like, oh, the Cowboys defense are awesome. They've now given up back-to-back games at home with over 40 points. They gave 44 today. They gave 48 in the playoff loss to the Packers last year. Those are the last 2 home games. When you're giving up 2 40 burgers at home, that's not great.
And they hadn't lost at home in 2 years.
I know. Yeah. But as much as we want to talk about on the Cowboys, how about giving some credit to the New Orleans Saints? Okay, we actually talked about this on Fantasy Football Happy Hour this week. We were just sort of like, what if the Saints are actually good? I think everyone sort of wrote off week 1. They beat the Panthers. The Panthers are a disaster, whatever. But the Saints have always had a good defense. So the question was, could they unlock the offense? And give Clint Kubiak credit. Coming in there, their new offense coordinator, this is a team that previously, just never put their guys in motion. And in the first 2 weeks, I haven't looked at the snaps from this week yet, but at least in week 1, they were one of the top 3 teams in the NFL in terms of most plays in motion. And I saw that a lot against the Cowboys today. Carr was fantastic. Get this. They have now had the most points through 2 games of a season by any team since the 2009 Saints, who, by the way, went on to win the Super Bowl that year. They scored on their first.
Speaking into existence.
They scored on their first 15 possessions this season when Derek Carr was in the game. 15 straight.
That's ridiculous.
It's one thing to do it against Carolina, but to do it on the road at Dallas?
It's night and day from what we saw last season. Why? Why has it changed?
Well, Matthew was talking about motion. Motion's great. Motion can affect the defense. What I love what Kubiak is doing is he's fitting it all together. And he learned this from his dad. Okay, the run game looks like the passing game, looks like the screen game, looks like the play action game. It all fits together. So when you're a defender, these tips that you have to say, if they get in this formation with these splits, it's going to be a run.
5 different plays.
5 different plays, and he complements it all, and they're playing fast. It's not like they're reinventing things. They're just complementing things, and the execution of the ball snap in both the run game and the pass game, it's a high level right now.
And that's what Kamara told you earlier today, Maria. He said, there's a plan.
Yeah.
And players love when they can see the full plan and the why into the plays that are being called.
And here's the key. Adversity is inevitable. How will they deal with adversity? Remember last year there was that Monday night game where Derek Carr was chastising the receivers and it got a little ugly. You have none of that when there's 15 touchdowns. But when that happens, and you know it's going to happen at some point, watch Derek Carr and see how everybody reacts.
Well, it's so weird that when you started that sentence about adversity, I thought, well, you're going to talk about the Cowboys. That's where I thought you were going, because they're 1-1, and they just got embarrassed, by the Saints at home. And, Coach, I know I've talked to you for so long about the Cowboys, and what's important in Dallas is running the ball, and I feel like they have become a one-dimensional offense. Like they just aren't getting enough out of Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle in that run game. So it basically puts it all on Dak's shoulders, and they didn't have Jake Ferguson in this game, so they're without their starting tight end. So it's really it was CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks, and Cooks is a nice player, but Cooks probably shouldn't be the number 2 at this stage. And Jalen Tolbert had made one really nice catch, but it feels like their offense has become somewhat one-dimensional, and defenses, at least the Saints, weren't that scared of them.
Well, if you reflect back to last year, they played this way. And Dak just played at such a high level. He was the runner-up for the MVP. They threw the ball well consistently week in and week out, and he was able to carry him. But over time in the NFL, you want to take the burden off your quarterback. Couple examples. Buffalo. Love what Joe Brady's doing up there. They're taking some burden off of number 17. He threw it 19 times the other night, right? They're getting the running backs involved. They're throwing screens. They're making it easier on him. Look at Justin Herbert with the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh went in there, let's draft Joe Alt. We're going to run the ball. He threw it 20 times, right? So these elite players at this position, when they don't have a burden, all of a sudden it's like we have all this powder in our gun, right? We're not even using these guys yet. And right now the Cowboys are very reliant on their passing game. There's no doubt they want to be more balanced. Mike McCarthy's had balanced offenses all throughout his career. I think that's a worthwhile goal for them offensively going forward.
Let's talk about a team that waltzed into Detroit, who, we have high expectations for this squad. In Tampa Bay, though, Baker Mayfield. And even though he was sacked 4.5 times, he was under pressure a lot, but when it came down to the plays that they needed to make, they were able to make them, Matthew, and ultimately the Buccaneers walk away with the victory on the road.
What a great story for Baker Mayfield, by the way. I absolutely played, I thought, really well, avenges the loss from last year, got Chris Godwin involved. They talk about balanced offense, between Rashad White and Bucky Irving, and then obviously Godwin has a big game. They take a couple of shots to Mike Evans, and that's a game that Detroit would have won last year. I'm a little nervous about Detroit. They barely squeaked by the Rams in Week 1, a Rams team that just got blown out by Arizona, right? And then Tampa Bay comes in, and you would have expected the Lions to win that game, and Tampa Bay took it to them. I don't know. It's an impressive win for Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay.
And the defense was great, and they were down Antoine Winfield Jr. And Vita Vea got injured during the game. And they're just a team that thrives on the doubt. And they've asked me very nicely, quit saying good things about them. They don't want people to wake up to the fact that this was a team that made it to the Final 8 last year, had a bunch of key free agents and brought them all back. And everybody's like, who cares? And here they go.
This wasn't a surprising win to me for Tampa. We were there last year in Detroit. 2-minute drive, Baker Mayfield gets the ball to get an interception, but they were in that game in a hostile environment. So I wasn't surprised to see Tampa go back, play well. They started off last week against Washington, going out there. Baker, looked like the best quarterback in the NFL in Week 1 last Sunday. So I'm not surprised by this. I do think Detroit, they probably want to get in more of a rhythm. St. Brown hasn't been as involved in their offense as he's been in years past. So they need to find that, So I think even LaPorta, he hasn't had a lot of targets or catches. So they want to find a rhythm, but I don't think there's a need for Detroit to panic losing to Tampa. Tampa's a good football team.
Yeah, I think they're both really good teams, and they're going to be there at the end of the season. The interesting thing for me with Detroit, though, is when you're an elite offense, and they have been the last couple of years, everybody in the league studies you. Yeah. They spend months in the offseason watching all your stuff, going through your stats. a deep analysis of what you do, how you do it, who you give it to. And so that's the process that they're in right now. People are catching up to them a little bit. So I used to always say, hey, 80% of your offense is going to stay the same. 20% has to change. Sometimes it changes because of personnel, and sometimes it changes because it just has to change. This wasn't good, get rid of it. This is good, let's do it again, but let's do it differently. Because teams are locked in on the best. Offensive teams study the best offenses. Defensive teams study the best offenses. And I think Tampa had a really good plan to slow those guys down today.
It's been a slow start for Jared Goff as well. Through 2 games, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions total. They were 1 for 7 on in terms of red zone drives in this game as well. They just kind of stalled out. And Goff, got the big contract and everything like that. I don't know if pressure is feeling it, but these are 2 home games now. I mean, Jared Goff, last 2 years have just been awesome at home, and through the first 2 games this season, he hasn't been, and they've got to figure something out. Like we saw a nice game from Jamison Williams in week 1. Amon-Ra St. Brown got involved today, but to your point, they're not using Laporta. The running game seems a little bit out of sync. They want to be a power running team, and I don't know, they don't feel like they're what they were last year at the moment.
I've tried to be more positive, that may surprise you, about Jared Goff.
I've
tried to come around. But 5 years ago, the Rams came to the conclusion that Jared Goff can only take you so far. We have to move on from him. We have to move on from Jared Goff. And I wonder if the Lions are going to come to the same conclusion, that he can get us to the playoffs. He can get us to the division round. He can get us to the NFC Championship even. But there's a ceiling there that he can't punch through. And until he does it, that's going to follow him around.
No doubt, but I think he's a much better player now than he was 3 years ago.
For sure.
Much better player. He's played at a really high level in that building and outside of that building too. They've been a really balanced offense that attacks different ways. They just have to get back to doing that. There's weapons there. I love the fact that they're strong on the offensive line. The head coach is committed to running the football. Get that going again, and I think you're going to see a revitalized Jared Goff here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, we want to see what adjustments do they make, like you said. Everybody's studying you. Now what's next for Ben Johnson in that offensive game plan?
And the tricky thing, if you're a play caller, sometimes that gets into your mind.
Yeah.
This was good for us. Do they know it? Are they going to be all over it? So sometimes you got to put a different skirt on it, make it look a little differently, and then go do the same things.
Jared Goff sitting at home like, what? Why are you coming for me? They were just chanting my name at Ford Field. What happened?
Just to clean up that stat, by the 1 touchdown in 7 red zone possessions. That's why. I mean, come on. You've got weapons.
Sure.
That's
key in the red zone.
The
key is, can we just run the ball?
Absolutely.
All offensive coordinators know. I don't want to throw touchdowns in the red zone. Let's run it in. And you talked about their running game.
I mean, they got Montgomery and Gibbs. They got 2 of the best in the NFL. They got a great offensive line. They've got to start blowing people off that line.
And Jared Goff will be fine. The Matthew McConaughey gif where he's drying his eyes with dollar bills, he'll be fine.
I know he will. I know he will. But this is a team that was, a couple plays away from going to the Super Bowl last year that has Super Bowl aspirations. And so, when you have a bad loss at home to Tampa Bay, and I would argue that that's a game they should have won or could have won. I don't want to take anything away from the Buccaneers, that you start thinking, okay, why did that happen?
All right, aspirations, expectations aside for them, let's just give the floor to Mike Florio so he can tell us whether or not the Vikings are for real.
Well, it's to be determined. Today was impressive. The Vikings did it last year against the San Francisco 49ers on a Monday night. Sam Darnold comes over, is the starter. He knows that offense. The Vikings know how to beat the San Francisco defense, and so we saw it play out. Next week is the Texans. The week after that's a trip to Green Bay, and then Week 5, London, and Aaron Rodgers.
Go all in, man.
So
go all in.
I want to see what happens because the bye's after that game. 3 more games. I want to see where they are after 5 games. But so far, so good.
What I'm going to say is Zach Wilson should be excited somewhere. We were sitting in the screening room today.
Christian Hackenberg may have a chance somewhere.
Me and Maria sitting there talking. We're like, look, these former Jets quarterbacks are
Geno's chilling.
Geno Smith is out there. Sam Darnold, big wins today. So I do think we understand what Kevin O'Connell did last year. So many different quarterbacks coming through there, still going to win games. So I think you give him a guy like Sam Darnold. He talked about how much he grew last year going to San Francisco, being over there with Shanahan. Now he gets a chance to run his own show. So it's exciting to see. I think they're going to have a legit chance in that division. And you look around the NFC, they should be sitting there saying, hey, there's no reason why we can't. That defense under Brian Flores has continued to improve. Added some players this year, Stephon Gilmore, Dallas Turner in the draft. They beat the 49ers, and they handled the 49ers pretty well on defense. So they should be excited that they can be a real contender.
Yeah, no doubt. And sometimes quarterbacks just need a fresh start. We were talking about Tampa. a little bit ago? Baker Mayfield, right? How many teams was he on a couple of years ago, right? He gets a fresh start there. All of a sudden, you're not the guy. You can watch, you can learn, and then when you get your opportunity again, maybe you have a different spirit about you. And I think that's what's happened with some of these guys. Certainly it's happened with Sam Darnold. I watched him last year in practice in San Francisco, and he just, after looking like he had been beaten down in New York, he just seemed like a different guy. He seemed like the guy that was drafted coming out of USC. He had a little life back in him. And I think when he goes to Minnesota, sure, they draft the guy from Michigan. But now he gets his chance. He's a more mature player. And I think Kevin O'Connell does a great job instilling confidence in these guys. I love the throw coming out of the end zone, the big pass to Jefferson, right? If you don't believe in your guy, you're going to hand it, throw it quick, and punt it, right? So they go hard play action. They take a shot down the field. And when you empower your quarterback like that, if they got anything in them, they're going to respond, and he certainly did today.
Let me just get on one of my favorite soapbox items for 5 seconds. This is why young quarterbacks coming out in the draft, top prospects, should be willing to say, I'm not going to play for the Jets, or I'm not going to go play for this team. They're going to ruin my career, and I'm going to have to wait 4 or 5 years before I even get a chance to prove that I can play. And I think it's a real dynamic.
That was longer than 5 seconds. You want to see if you
I want to see players push back against the draft system and say, I'm not going to that team just because they have the rights to draft me. I want to play for a better team and have a better career.
That's the lawyer in you right there.
There you go. Through 2 weeks, Sam Darnold is 6th in passer rating. And what an unbelievable story, to your point. Goes to the Jets, that's a disaster. Goes to Carolina, also a disaster. Goes to San Francisco, but he knows he's not going to be the guy. And finally, he comes to Minnesota. Hey, we got a shot to be a guy, first-round draft pick, right? They draft J.J. McCarthy. But then, unfortunately, okay, so J.J.'s not going to play this year. And now you're just like, okay, you're Sam Darnold, like, what's the worst that could happen? I've already been through the ringer. And so he's playing loose. And I have to tell you, I think Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores are coaching their asses off. Like, on both sides of the ball, the Vikings are so impressive. This wasn't just, oh, hey, we managed to beat San Francisco.
Yeah.
They controlled this game from start to finish. And that's a 49ers team that we just saw destroy the Jets on Monday night. Like, you know, the 49ers are one of the best teams in the NFL, and they came into Minnesota. Minnesota said, we ain't scared. And they took it to them. Like, I credit them. I get it. It's a tough schedule. Texans, Packers, Jets, the next 3 for Minnesota. But they go 2-1, and we're sitting here in week 5, and they're 4-1, Mike. This is the first time they're 2-0 since 2016.
May have to sneak some booze in the studio that day if that happens.
Florio dancing in the street.
Yes, exactly. So week 5, we're going to have something for you. A Dollarita from Applebee's.
Good for the Vikings, good for their fans, good for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, guys, it's time for the speed round, our reactions to week 2. We're going to start off with the most complete win today, Matthew.
We already talked about the Saints. How about the Arizona Cardinals and my ride or die, Kyler Murray, took it to the Rams? Not even close.
Yeah, I'm Cardinals was what I wrote down. Because historically, Sean McVay has done very well against the Cardinals, and the Cardinals just completely dismantled the Rams. It was very impressive.
How about the Chargers? We talked about Jim Harbaugh, came out, ran the ball. Herbert didn't have to do much, won, and only gave up 3 points. And I get it, they played the Panthers right now. That seems like a good way to have a complete game in the NFL, but how about the Chargers?
Yeah, total domination. How about the Buffalo Bills the other night, right? Going down to Miami and just getting after them, and it was pretty impressive. They're a good football team. They rule the East.
All right, most surprising win today.
I'm going to say the Raiders. I mean, you know, no one expected the Baltimore was an 8.5-point favorite, and Antonio Pierce, West Coast team, travels east on a 1 o'clock game, and they take it to Lamar Jackson, and the Ravens were 0-1. This was a game they needed to win, and all of a sudden they're 0-2. Credit to Antonio Pierce, Gardner Minshew, and the entire Raiders organization. That was a hell of a win.
I was surprised the Browns got it together with the distractions of the past week, how bad they looked at home in week 1. To go into Jacksonville and get that win and kind of level things out, I didn't expect it to happen.
Yeah, see, those 2 games, like Baltimore lost the game, and you know Jacksonville and Cleveland was kind of like, who's gonna like
Most
suck
surprising
less,
win
you know?
was the question, Devin. You're telling me you expected the Raiders to win?
A team that won was the Minnesota Vikings. They went and won. They went and beat the San Francisco 49ers. Fun to watch. Didn't really expect it, but they went and won that game.
Yeah, we've hit this one ad nauseum, but the Saints going to AT&T Stadium and just getting after the Cowboys in every way was the most surprising for me.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Most surprising loss. So now it flipped it.
I'll say the Colts. I'm sorry, you know, the Green Bay Packers are starting a quarterback who has not had any success in the NFL, who just got there a couple of weeks ago. You're the Colts that went down to the wire with the Houston Texans, a playoff team from last year. Like, that's a game they should have won. The Packers are beat up, and, you know, credit to Green Bay and Matt LaFleur. Like, that was a surprising loss to me that the Colts lost that game.
I would have never dreamed the Ravens would lose at home with 3 extra days to prepare, the urgency of losing week 1, the extra saltiness that would come from almost winning the game and just having the toe out of bounds. I was stunned they let the Raiders hang around and take that one.
Yeah, I hate to just copy, but that's exactly where I was. I think the division they're in, where they want to be this season, to now start 0-2, to lose to Kansas City week 1 was one thing, but now extra time, they gave Lamar Jackson an extra rest day. He didn't practice at first, and then you come and you lose. And really a game that they kind of control, they just never put away, and they continue to have leads and let them slip away. That was very disappointing.
And what's surprising to me about them is it should be the exact opposite for them, because they're a team that can run the ball and play defense, but they've had these crazy fourth quarter collapses. It doesn't really fit with the DNA of that franchise. For me, the most surprising was the Rams going down to Arizona. And it's not the fact that Arizona won, but they dominated the Rams. Up and down the field, the Rams couldn't make an inch. I know Puka's hurt. Kupp gets hurt during the game. I get all that. Those are impactful players. But 41-10, that shocked me.
They just can't stay healthy. That's the thing about the Rams. They've had the injuries ever since training camp opened. It's only getting worse.
Yeah.
All right, I know we don't like to panic early, but in the first 2 weeks, if we were to panic, which team would it be for?
Well, I mean, I think the Rams are a good suggestion, and the Ravens are also a good suggestion. Both teams 0-2, as you mentioned, Coach. Rams are hurt. But just to give another team in the mix here to talk about, how about the Jaguars? Jaguars are now 0-2, and they looked awful against the Browns. I get it. The Browns are a good defense, but the offense looks out of sync. Trevor Lawrence doesn't look like the same guy. I don't know what's going on. And get their schedule. They're 0-2, and now they got to go to Buffalo. They're at Buffalo next week. Then they're at Houston. So, I mean, they had 2 home games, and they're 0-2. Now they got to go to Buffalo and Houston. Like, 1-3 or 0-4 is very real possibility. So that's a team that I'm panicking about after 0-2.
The Jaguars are 1-7 in their last 8 games. And before the season started, owner Shad Khan made it clear, my expectation is to win. And they haven't won. And if it continues, there's going to be some changes. It's obvious. The owner says it, and you can't get rid of Trevor Lawrence. Not that you would anyway. He's not the problem. But you're going to see a lot of changes around the franchise quarterback.
Yeah, for me, it was between the Ravens and the Rams. The Rams losing Puka, losing now Kupp possibly, but ultimately I went with the Ravens. Their next 3 games, the Cowboys, the Bills, and the Bengals. You're now 0-2, and for a lot of people, they have you back in the AFC Championship, possibly going to the Super Bowl, and now you're 0-2 with those 3 games. They got to find a way. So I'm not saying they're done, but there's a panic or a sense of urgency that has to come in play for this team.
No doubt. And they've had that kind of adversity through their history, and I bet on the Ravens. John Harbaugh will get them going, and they'll find a way over the course of the next 15 games to put themselves in position. I have zero doubt about that. The one team after 2 games for me is Miami. You know, their quarterback situation's so up in the air. And they're a team that had to kind of prove to themselves and to everybody else that they had to break through to the next level now. And now to remove Tua from that situation, we don't know how long that's going to happen. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of question marks down there.
Especially, by the way, that's a division that got a lot better than I think what people thought in the offseason. Obviously, we know what the Jets can do. We just saw what the Bills did to them. And the Patriots are going to be a tough out.
Talk about the Patriots. Talk about them.
The Patriots are going to be a tough out.
Mayo, baby.
Actually, we made it through the whole podcast without saying anything about the Patriots. And I'm okay with it.
If they would have won today,
Super Bowl 49 reunion today. We should definitely be talking about the Patriots.
That's right. Malcolm Butler out there
10 years
ringing
ago
the bell.
today. What a special
we had a lot going on, but we didn't talk about it. But maybe next week, we'll see.
Where was Devin on that play when Malcolm Butler made that interception?
I think he was on the side.
I was coaching him up.
He was coaching him up and ready to celebrate afterwards, all right? Well, that's all we have for week 2, but week 3, we got the Chiefs going on the road, taking on the Falcons. We will get you set with Football Night in America at 7 Eastern, and of course, you'll be able to find us on the pod after all of week 3 Sunday action is over. Join us next time.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.